We'll stay in Jerusalem. Yaakov Katz is a senior columnist at the Jerusalem Post. He's a fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute, as well as author of 3 books on the Israeli military, including Shadow Strike. Welcome back.
Thank you, John.
Few will ever know the pain of the Bibas family. And right now, they're angry that the Prime Minister made public these details about the release of the bodies of the 2 young children, as well as Shiri Bibas, the mother, and that came without their approval. In a statement, they've asked the public not to eulogize our loved ones until there is a confirmation after final identification. This now seems to be clearly a day that the Bibas family had hoped would not happen. There had been this hope, not just with the family, but across Israel, that somehow maybe these 2 little boys would make it out alive. But now that has not happened. How traumatic is this moment?
It's a traumatic moment. I would say it's probably one of the saddest days, if not the saddest day since October 7th, John. The Bibas, Shiri, the mother, holding her 2 sons covered in a blanket on October 7th, surrounded by a violent and murderous mob. Those 2 young boys, angels, Kfir and Ariel. Kfir was just not even a year old, right? They were taken, those redheaded boys, so cruelly to Gaza. And to watch now what's happening in Khan Younis, to see a stage for Hamas to make a spectacle of the return of people who were murdered when they had taken them, stolen them from their homes, little children. To just imagine who is willing to do that, who could take those young little boys with them into Gaza, put their lives on the line, and have them be killed while they're supposed to be protected. And now to put on a spectacle and a show to return them just shows us once again who is this enemy that Israel has been fighting against the last 16 months, and how cruel and barbaric they truly are.
See, that's what doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because on the one hand, Hamas wants to try and spin the release of these 4 bodies, these 4 dead hostages, as a way of showing their commitment to the Gaza ceasefire. But then at the same time, as you say, they're putting on a show. There's this sort of disrespect for the dead, if you like, in this moment.
You're right, John. On the one hand, you would think that Hamas would want to show that it's back in charge of Gaza, that it's trying to play ball and cooperate with the international community. It doesn't want to be seen as a illegitimate partner for what is supposed to come when it comes to the rule over Gaza and the future control of this embattled territory. But on the other hand, we just see the cynicism. We see the cruelty. At every juncture, John, Hamas shows its true self. And that is, these are human monsters, unfortunately. These are people who are willing to do everything. They sanctify death over the sanctification of life. And unfortunately, this is a type of enemy that is always going to be very difficult whenever a country like Israel, a democracy, a country that actually sanctifies life, that has tried to do everything possible to bring back its people. Let's remember, we're in the middle of a hostage release, that for every hostage that we get back as a country, and another 6 living hostages will hopefully be released in just 2 days on Saturday. Every hostage that Israel gets back, we release about upwards of 50 mass murderers, people who have murdered people in cold blood. We send them back to their families, to their homes, to Gaza, to the West Bank, or even outside the borders of Israel, depending on the danger that they pose to the future of Israel. But we release murderers to get back our people who were stolen from music festivals or from their beds. It just shows a complete difference of values, John. And I think that's unfortunately what we're seeing right now with those images out of Khan Younis.
On the Israeli side, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seems to be taking greater control over ceasefire talks, appointing a close political ally to lead talks over phase 2 of the current ceasefire, replacing Israel's previous chief negotiator. For the families of the hostages who are not part of the 33 being released in phase 1, there is now this increasing concern that there will never be a phase 2. And that move by the Prime Minister kind of reaffirms those doubts in many ways. Do you think that they will get to phase 2? Or will there just be a continuation, if you like, in a best case scenario, of phase 1?
I mean, that is the big question, and I don't think we have a clear answer. On the one hand, you're right. Netanyahu has shaken up the negotiating team. He's installed the strategic affairs minister, a close ally and former advisor of his, Ron Dermer, to run now those negotiations instead of the 2 heads of Israel's different intelligence agencies, the Mossad and the Shin Bet. Dermer now will be leading those negotiations, partly because he does have very close ties with the Americans, and particularly with Trump's Mideast envoy, Steve Witkoff. So there's a lot of ability here for Dermer and Witkoff to work together on spearheading these negotiations. But at the same time, there is a lot of concern that with the installation of a politician to head up those negotiations, these talks will become even more politicized than they already were. And we do know, John, that for the last 16 months, there has been some hesitancy on the side of this Prime Minister Netanyahu to move ahead with a hostage deal because of the way that it would endanger his ruling coalition. And we also know that one senior member of his government, Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, has already made very clear that if Israel does not renew the fighting in Gaza, does agree to a complete cessation of the fighting in stage 2, which is what would be required in stage 2 to get back the remaining hostages, he would pull out of the government. So Netanyahu is at something of a juncture. He's going to have to decide in this fork in the road, what does he prioritize now? Does he prioritize the hostages coming back? Or does he prioritize his political survival and somehow try to keep some hostages coming back in a trickle and keep his coalition together? We'll find out in the next couple of weeks, because this has to be decided very soon.
And in the meantime, hostage families wait. Israel goes through this national trauma, and the 2 little boys are dead. Yaakov, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, John.